Hello everybody, my name is Andre Rivers. I'm the founder of RIFL Corp, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in to our blockchain university. So this is our first blockchain university, and we're going to actually indulge into the basic concept of blockchain. And before we even discuss blockchain, the first thing we want to talk about is, alright, you guys can see, one moment. We're going to basically discuss how Bitcoin, the difference between what everybody is probably knows blockchain for, which is for the digital asset, which is Bitcoin, and we're going to explain the inner workings of blockchain and how blockchain is significant and why I believe it's going to be the future and why we need to basically know about it. So here we are. First, I want to explain Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a digital asset that uses the blockchain, but it's not actually blockchain. So Bitcoin is not blockchain. Blockchain is a very different avenue. It's not actually an asset, it's a sequence, and I'm going to explain to you how blockchain works, okay? Alright, one moment. How do you get to the eraser? So let me erase all of this. This is longer than expected. Size, make it bigger. There we are. I'm not very adequate with this thing. Alright. The purpose of blockchain is to be used as a distributed ledger. Oh, I can't. What the purpose of blockchain is to be used as a distributed ledger. So, blockchain equals distributed ledger. And before we can discuss what a distributed ledger is, I want to basically explain to you guys what a ledger is. So you guys probably are already familiar with what a ledger is. A ledger just basically keeps track of records. So a ledger would be let's say a bank uses a ledger. The voting system uses a ledger. There's various other things that use a ledger. A ledger just basically keeps track of information for you. So blockchain is innovative because it gives you the ability to have a distributed ledger. And I'm going to explain to you why the distributed ledger is important. Okay? Alright, so first let's show you guys about how an open ledger would work as far as managing transactions. Okay, one moment. So let's imagine there's person A, person B, person D, and person C, okay? And they're all different individuals, and this is going to be a open ledger. So, open ledger. So an open ledger is basically everybody can see the ledger, but it's centralized. So there's one ledger, and everybody can visually see the ledger to confirm that all the transactions that are on the ledger are agreed amongst the people. Well, not even. You can cut that part. So let's do a transaction on the open ledger. So let's imagine if person A has $10. Okay. And if A, I'll change the color. If A wants to send person B $5 on the ledger, we have to put that back on the open ledger as, oh, I'm sorry, here we are, as, let's see, oh, I'm terrible with that, one moment, it's an ugly little box, here we go, it's a bigger box. Let's imagine that A transfers to B $5. So everybody can see that on the ledger, that A had $10. So obviously he's able to transfer $5 to B. So now B has $5. So imagine if B wanted to transfer to D $3. Okay? 3. So that goes on to the open ledger as well, where everybody can see it, where B transferred to D $3. Alright, now let's suppose that D wanted to transfer Let's suppose that D wanted to transfer $4. Everybody can see that on the ledger this can't happen because D only has $3. So since B sent D $3 and D only has $3, D can't send $4 to C because that would disrupt the ledger. You know, the ledger says that A had 10, A sent B 5, so B has 5. If B sends D 3, then that means that D can't send C 4 because D only has 3. So everybody can see that. That's the whole point of a ledger, where you're keeping financial records so that there can't be any type of fraud or there can't be any type of discrepancy amongst the ledger. But this is a open ledger. Remember, this is an open ledger, so there's one centralized ledger that everybody has to agree upon, where you can't really take it anywhere. There's one person that operates this ledger and watches over this ledger, and he records all of these transactions. So a bank uh, social system, all those type of systems, they are ledger systems. A notary, they have a centralized place where one person looks over the entire ledger and makes sure that all the transactions amongst the ledger are appropriate and that they can actually go through. So we went through that and said that, let's suppose, all right, so let's just say D does do a transaction that he can do, and he sends C $2, okay? And that'll be the last one. C. Oh, this is terrible. So C, no, I'm sorry, D sends C $2. And this is all on a open ledger system that everybody can see. It's open. It's an open ledger. There's one centralized thing that is watching this ledger. Now, we talked about the open ledger. I want to explain to you guys what the importance of a distributed ledger is. Now, if we have a distributed ledger, everybody has copies of this ledger. And there's not one person that's managing this ledger. There's multiple people managing. Well, everybody on the ledger has their own copy of the ledger. So that's what distributed ledger would be, where everybody has a copy. So the copies of this ledger, they're called nodes. Nodes is an individual copy of a ledger. And now we're going to discuss why distributed ledger and the functions of a distributed ledger and why a distributed ledger is important, okay? All right, so let me clear this page first. So like we mentioned, any company that monitors a transaction has a ledger. So a distributed ledger would basically disrupt that. It would make it so that everybody has a copy of the ledger. Therefore, there needs to be no centralized person or institution that manages that ledger. So again, let's suppose that A, B, C, D, they have the ledger where A, blah, 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 B, blah, blah, blah. Let's not even do this. So let's create this ledger. Well, let's create the A through D again for the distributed ledger, okay? So person A is here, person B is here, C and D. Okay. So now there is no need for a centralized ledger because we're going to make a distributed ledger. Distributed ledger. Now with the distributed ledger, each one is going to have its own copy of the ledger, which is the node. The node is the copy of the ledger. So every person A, person B, person C, and person D will all have their own copy of the node. But let's explain. Okay. So instead of it being one centralized A and B and D and blah and blah blah blah, instead of that being centralized in the middle, let's imagine. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. A has its own copies of the nodes. D has its own copies of the nodes. Well, of the ledger, I'm sorry. D has its own nodes. C has its own nodes. And B has its own nodes. So they all have their own copies of this ledger. It's distributed. So all the transactions that we mentioned previously that was on the open ledger, for a distributed ledger, each person would have its own copy of that same ledger. Alright, and I'm going to show you the benefit of that, okay? Well, not show you per se, but I'm going to explain. If each individual has their own version of the ledger or their own node, there is no need for a centralized ledger. And there is no need for, and it also makes it so that each transaction can be done faster because there is no centralized one person you have to wait for. Everybody has their own copy of the node, therefore everything can be decentralized, okay? And I'm going to show you, we're going to dig a little deeper into the distributed ledger, and we're going to talk about something called miners, okay? Let me just delete this. Okay. Okay. So miners have their own specialized node. So a miner, they have special nodes. Now, you're probably dealing with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. You heard of miners before, and miners are the people who create the blocks on the ledger. So that's another reason why they call it blockchain, because of those blocks that I showed you on the ledger. Those blocks and this, the copies of the ledger are those. This is why they call it blockchain per se, because it creates those blocks on the ledger. Well, the monetary value of Bitcoin comes from the creation of these blocks, and I'm going to show you how those blocks are created with distributed ledger, okay? So first, let's assume that Jesus Christ, this pen is crazy. Let's assume that A and D are the miners. So A and D are the miners, okay? So A has a special node and D has a special node, okay? So A and D are the miners, and C and B are just going to be on the transaction, or they're going to be on the chain, but they're not miners, okay? So miners own special nodes that actually publish the transactions to the blockchain for everybody to see. So a miner actually solves the transactions that goes on, and they publish it to everybody's ledger. So the distributed ledger, they will publish it to everybody's ledger. All right. And miners compete amongst themselves to basically confirm that the transactions are validated, and they put it on the ledger. And the first to do it is given a financial reward. And that's where the asset incentive comes from with Bitcoin. That's where the value comes from with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, because you receive a monetary reward for publishing these transactions to everybody's ledger. So the first person to publish or solve the transaction and publish it to the ledger, they receive a financial reward. And that's what the miners are. Okay? So, for example, let's say that A, again, he has $10. Okay? And A sends to B $10. Okay? So B has $10 now. Okay. And let's just put that on their blockchain or their nodes. Okay. So A. Oh, let me erase this and make it a little bigger for you. Let's say A sent B $10, okay? And that's on everybody's. So D is the other miner, so let's put it on his blockchain too. That A sent B so since D is the other miner, let's put it on his blockchain too, that A sent B $10. And we can verify that on the chain that that's a true transaction. Okay, now let's assume B sent D $5. Okay. This is true because B has $10, so let's put that on their blockchain. This is able to happen, that B can send D $5 and B sends D $5. Okay. So let's say that, let's imagine if B also, I'm going to do this with a different color. Let's imagine if B wants to send $5 to C. But we just seen that A sent B 10 and B sent D $5, so that's published on the ledger. Now let's say B sends C $5. Now this is where the transactions start to be validated. Okay, so in order to validate it, again, we are adding this to the blockchain, or we're adding this to the ledger. So can B send C $5? Now what happens is, the easy part is the validation of these transactions. That's the easy part, validating them and making sure that they're correct. Because with fast computers and the computing systems, it's quick to solve if a 5 plus 0 equals 5 transaction or stuff like that. The simple math transactions are easy to solve with those computational powers that computers have. So that's the easy part. So let me show you. I'm just going to write the steps down. The first step is validation. And that's validating if the transaction can go through. And we can see since B received $10 from A, it should have at least $10 to send out. Even though it sent $5 to D, it still has another $5 to send to C. So it's validated, okay? Now the second part is the tough part. And this is finding the key. Now on these transactions, since A or D could easily solve these quick as fast as possible and publish it to everybody's ledger, but since that's so easy to do, it would make it so that there is no security and there is no reward based system, okay? So the reward comes from guessing the key. Now the key is random. They basically use their computational power to guess random keys. And what happens is they will publish the transaction with a key. And the first transaction to have the correct key gets to publish it to everybody's blockchain. So they get to publish it for their blockchain, get to publish it on their blockchain. It goes into everybody's blockchain. So, well, it goes onto everybody's ledger, same thing. So what happens is the first person to guess the key and solve the transaction gets the financial reward. Okay. And that's how the blockchain fundamentally works, and that's where the financial reward comes from. And this is why it's something that once you know the inner workings of the blockchain, you'll realize how important it is and how much of the future is going to be. This is going to be something that we can't really scale, you know. It's going to be something that's beneath all of the inner workings of our financial system, our banking systems, our, you know, anything that has to do with keeping records, you know, for the mortgages and loans and the legal system. Anything that has to do with keeping records is going to be on the blockchain or on something else I want to discuss called smart contracts, which is basically very similar, but I'm just going to delete all of this stuff for you, okay? Alright. So now you should have a good idea of where the financial reward comes from on the blockchain and how it is an asset class and what exactly it does. And the main things you want to discuss are open versus distributed ledger. And as we discussed, the open ledger is a ledger that everybody can see. Even everybody has a view of the ledger, and it's sometimes centralized, but when it's distributed, everybody would still have that vision of the ledger, but there is no one person creating the records of that ledger. It's basically verified by everybody, and the miners have a financial incentive to solve the transactions and produce the transactions and publish them on everybody's blockchain. And that's the power of the distributed ledger. Okay, and again, like we mentioned, the miners, they're the ones who solve the transaction and they publish it to the public ledger for the financial reward. And again, so let's just go back. Open ledger. Open means everybody can see it. It's public. Distributed ledger. Everybody can see it. It's still public, but everybody has their own record. There is no one person managing the ledger. And the miners are the ones who solve the transactions. They find the key. They publish it to the ledger. They publish the transaction to the ledger. And they also receive a financial reward for the workings that they do. All right. So describing blockchain to me as the thing behind Bitcoin is like describing the internet as the thing behind the email. The blockchain is very, very, very complex, and it's going to be used for all of the inner workings of not only our financial system, but our justice system, our social system, every system that we have where we have to keep records. They're going to ultimately be on the blockchain, or they're going to be on smart contracts. And smart contracts are very similar. A smart contract is basically very similar to a distributed ledger, where the contract states if something happens, if A happens, then B happens. And if B happens, then C happens. And basically, C can't happen unless A, B happens. Stuff like that. So you can't basically alter anything within these contracts without it changing the previous contracts, you know. That's all that a smart contract is, which is very similar and pretty much the same as the blockchain. But it's let me see, okay. And that's why it's important, because, and again, I'm going to speak, it's important because for security purposes, you can't alter the chains or the blocks without the other blocks being altered. So like I previously mentioned, SMB10, and let's say C7. If I want to alter this and make this 12, let's say 12, this wouldn't hold true anymore. So this would be canceled. You see what I mean? As far as it has to basically abide by the blocks. The blocks all have to basically be equal. You can't change one block without disrupting the entire network. And that's the importance of blockchain, okay? All right. Excuse me there, that was kind of nasty. I also want to discuss, here's another example. Here's a concrete example of blockchain. Imagine you are with friends and you guys are doing a raffle, and you put, let's say, $1,000 in a pot. Okay, and that's coming from 5 different friends. So let's say A, B, C, D, E. You guys all put $1,000 into the raffle, so that'll make it 5,000 is the prize. Now, if it's a raffle where A or B or C or D or E, any of these people are doing anything malevolent, or they're trying to cheat to win the $5,000, since there's so many people that are managing this money or that are watching over this money, it'll be pretty hard and it'll be difficult to basically get everybody to coerce with you to cheat. You know what I'm saying? So if somebody tries to cheat or somebody tries to fraud, there's still other people here to confirm that here. So if A and B say, hey, let's cheat and split the 5,000, no, CDE is still here to confirm that and make sure, no, you're not allowed to do that. If A says to C, let's cheat, no, BDE, they're still here to confirm that you're not allowed to do that. And that's what, like, an example would be for parallel to what the blockchain actually does. So it basically offers security and insurance because you don't have to worry about one person managing the entire thing, and you don't have to worry about how honest or how upfront that person is because you have so many people on the chain. And then it's like the raffle, you have so many people in the raffle, they're not going to allow you to cheat because they want to win too. They're a part of it too. They want to make sure it's legitimate. So if it's not for everybody, if it doesn't benefit everybody, they're not going to let you do that, okay? So and I'm also going to talk about one more thing. Moment. Let me see. And a lot of people probably, okay, now I understand blockchain, but what does it have to do with cryptocurrency, okay? So we spoke earlier about how the financial rewards of keeping the transactions happen and how that creates a value. So the more people on the chain, like I mentioned before, if it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, if this many people on the chain, it makes it more legitimate and it gives a bigger financial reward because the number of people that's on the chain that are, if they're all mining, actually, that'll give it a bigger financial reward. But the more people that's on the chain is the more trustworthy it will be because it's not a centralized thing where it can be manipulated. It's multiple people or a various amount of people that are on the chain that are managing their own distributed ledger, and they're not going to let you do anything malevolent or anything that's cheating, you know. They're not going to let you scam the blockchain because there's so many different people on there. So I'm going to compare this to the internet because a lot of people like to call blockchain the internet 3.0. And I'm going to just state some of the notes that I have regarding the thing between. But first, let me mention how there is no without crypto, there is no blockchain. Because you need a financial reward. You need a financial reward to solve and publish these transactions. So without that currency, that cryptocurrency, there is no blockchain. And it's the other way around. Without blockchain, there is no crypto. Because if you don't have that distributed ledger to keep track of those transactions, you don't have any reward-based system to solve those transactions, you know what I'm saying? So they're basically they're not one and the same, but you need the other to survive. Crypto needs the blockchain just like blockchain needs the crypto. And I'm going to explain some more about, okay. Now, let's say the internet offers information distribution, communication, so the internet is supposed to solve these problems. Well, they did solve these problems. You can get all the information you need. You can distribute whatever type of stuff you need, as far as think about Amazon or eBay. You can distribute stuff. And communication. Think about social media, Twitter, Facebook. It makes it easier to communicate. It makes it easier to distribute things. And it makes it easier to solve or to gather information. I'm sorry, not solve information. But it makes it easier to do all three of those things. Those are the things the internet solves. Now, blockchain, they like to call it the Internet 3.0. This is going to solve trust and disintermediation. So it's solving trust because, like we mentioned before, you have so many people with their own copy of the ledger, and it's published. It's solved and published on the ledger by different people, and they all have that same copy of the ledger. It's not one person managing the ledger, and that's what we mean by disintermediation. There's not just one person managing the ledger and watching over the ledger and keeping track of all the records. There's a distributed effort between everybody to keep track of those records, and they're all instantly changed amongst. Whenever anything happens, everybody's ledgers change. Whenever anything changes, everybody's ledger changes. So it's disintermediation where it's not just one person watching over it. And the trust is there because you have to basically trust. You have to trust each other on the ledger because it can't work without it. If anybody is doing anything, it's amongst the people. It's all the people. It's the power. It's giving power back to the people. So everybody has the ability to watch over the ledger. Everybody has the ability to add to the ledger. But nobody has the ability to change or adjust the ledger because it's distributed. Everybody has it. So they're not going to let you add something that don't exist, and they're not going to let you fraud it because you're frauding a system that is controlled by everybody, you know? So that's what makes it different, okay? And that's going to be all for our intro to blockchain. On our next step, we're going to go a little bit deeper into the world of blockchain and also discuss some of the cryptocurrencies and the factors that make cryptocurrencies intriguing, and also how the assets are valued. Okay? All right. Thank you.